Imagine a fighter jet that the West never wanted Pakistan to have, a jet that rewrites the balance of power in South Asia, a jet that proves you don't need billions of dollars or Western blessings to dominate the skies. This is the JF-17, the aircraft they now whisper about in their own defense circles, as the F-16 replacement India can't stop. The JF-17 Thunder is not just an aircraft. It is a loud declaration of Pakistan's determination to be self-reliant in the most sensitive and strategically crucial sector of all, defense production. For decades, Pakistan depended on Western suppliers, particularly the United States, for fighter jets, and while the F-16 served as the backbone of the Pakistan Air Force, it always came tied with political baggage, restrictions, and delays whenever relations soured. This dependency created a sense of vulnerability, because in times of heightened conflict or political pressure, Washington could restrict spare parts, upgrades, or even suspend deliveries altogether, leaving Pakistan exposed. The JF-17 project, developed in collaboration with China, broke those chains. It signaled to the world that Pakistan was no longer content with being at the mercy of Western approvals to secure its skies, but was ready to shape its own destiny in aviation and defense. The aircraft's indigenous production at the Pakistan Aeronautical Complex in Kamra serves as living proof of this self-reliance. Every jet rolling out of those hangars carries within it the message that Pakistan can now design, produce, and upgrade fighters without waiting for foreign generosity. This shift is exactly why Western defense circles pay attention. It is not merely about the specifications of the aircraft, but about the sovereignty it represents. The ability to field a capable combat jet designed with local input and tailored for national requirements changes the strategic balance, because no sanctions or policy shifts can ground Pakistan's fleet anymore. This is a luxury that even many bigger economies cannot afford, as they remain tethered to foreign suppliers for critical systems. The JF-17 thus embodies a psychological advantage as much as a military one, because it proves to Pakistan's adversaries that the nation is no longer dependent, no longer restricted, and no longer vulnerable to external pressure when it comes to defending its skies. The symbolism of that independence resonates louder than the roar of the jet's engine. And it is this symbolism that makes the JF-17 more than just a plane, but a national asset that represents resilience, sovereignty, and strategic foresight. The F-16 has long been considered one of the most reliable and combat-proven fighter jets in the world. But its biggest drawback for countries like Pakistan has always been its staggering cost and the strings that come attached with acquiring and maintaining it. Over the decades, Pakistan invested heavily in its F-16 fleet, but the reality is that every spare part, every upgrade, and every new purchase was always dependent on approval from Washington. This turned the F-16 into not just a fighter jet, but also a tool of political leverage, one that could be withheld in times of strained relations. The JF-17 Thunder changed that equation completely because it delivers almost similar combat power at a fraction of the cost. The aircraft is designed to be affordable, allowing Pakistan to build and deploy entire squadrons without straining its defense budget, a reality that simply isn't possible with expensive Western jets. Affordability does not mean compromise either, as the JF-17 has been battle-tested in real combat situations, particularly during Pakistan's aerial encounter with India in 2019, where it proved its ability to defend national airspace and strike with precision. That moment alone gave the JF-17 credibility that no sales brochure or exhibition could match. It showed the world that Pakistan's low-cost fighter was not just a budget aircraft, but a combat-ready tool capable of holding its own against more expensive adversaries. For developing nations across Africa, Asia, and the Middle East, this makes the JF-17 an irresistible proposition. They are not only getting a modern fighter at a manageable price, but also escaping the long-term political entanglements that come with buying American or European jets. This combination of affordability, independence, and proven combat readiness is what places the JF-17 in the spotlight as a serious alternative to the aging F-16, and why Western defense circles with some unease have started acknowledging its growing role as a viable replacement. For India, the rise of the JF-17 is nothing short of a strategic headache. For years, New Delhi built its military strategy on the assumption that Pakistan would always remain technologically one step behind in the air. India invested billions into Western jets like the French Rafale, betting that high-cost purchases would cement its superiority over Pakistan. But the JF-17 changes that narrative entirely because it allows Pakistan to maintain a cutting-edge fleet without burning through its economy. India can mock the aircraft in public statements, but the reality is that every Block 3 JF-17 entering service narrows the technological gap that New Delhi thought it had secured with its expensive acquisitions. What makes it worse for India is the export potential of the JF-17. Nations in Asia, Africa, and the Middle East that traditionally looked at India as a defense partner now see Pakistan emerging as a credible alternative supplier, which weakens India's image as the sole South Asian leader in defense diplomacy. The fact that the JF-17 is being exported and used by countries like Nigeria and Myanmar strengthens Pakistan's defense credibility on the global stage, while India is left to explain why its own indigenous aircraft programs continue to lag behind. In psychological terms, the JF-17 undermines India's long-cherished narrative of regional dominance by putting an affordable, exportable, and combat-proven fighter jet into the hands of Pakistan. Every successful export deal is not just a commercial victory, but a strategic one, as it elevates Pakistan's role in global defense networks and chips away at India's claim of being the region's undisputed military power. The JF-17 is thus not just a jet flying over Pakistan's skies, but a storm cloud hanging over New Delhi's ambitions, a reminder that military dominance cannot be bought with money alone when innovation and partnerships create alternatives that are equally powerful and far more sustainable. When the JF-17 program was first introduced, many critics around the world dismissed it as a low-cost imitation of Western fighters, a budget-friendly aircraft that could never compete with the likes of the F-16 or Mirage series. But as the years passed and Pakistan continued to refine the design, those doubts began to fade, especially with the arrival of the Block 3 variant. This evolution transformed the JF-17 from a modest lightweight fighter into a sophisticated machine equipped with technologies that place it firmly in the fourth-generation plus category. At the heart of this transformation lies the integration of the Active Electronically Scanned Array (AESA) radar, a capability that only the most advanced aircraft in the world currently possess. This radar gives the JF-17 a massive leap in situational awareness, detection range, and targeting accuracy, putting it on par with jets that cost several times more. Add to this its electronic warfare systems, helmet-mounted targeting display, and compatibility with beyond visual range BVR missiles, and suddenly the JF-17 is not merely a participant on the battlefield, but a serious contender. For Pakistan, this evolution represents more than technological progress. It is proof that the country can keep its indigenous fighter platform relevant in the face of rapid global advancements. Every upgrade introduced into the JF-17 ensures that the aircraft remains a flexible and credible solution for both Pakistan's Air Force and for other nations considering it for purchase. What began as a modest collaboration has now matured into a program that keeps adapting, innovating, and expanding its capabilities, and this adaptability is what unsettles many of its critics. While India spends billions trying to purchase state-of-the-art fighters from abroad, Pakistan has built a system that can be upgraded and evolved on its own terms. This ongoing technological evolution of the JF-17 is why Western defense experts are compelled to recognize it as more than just a stopgap fighter. It is becoming the kind of platform that nations can rely on for decades, continually modernized to keep pace with threats, and all without the crushing costs that come with Western alternatives. The export story of the JF-17 is perhaps one of the most fascinating aspects of its rise because it highlights how a fighter jet designed for Pakistan's own needs has now become a global option for nations that cannot or do not want to rely on Western suppliers. For decades, the international defense market was dominated by Western giants who controlled who could buy what, at what price, and under what conditions. This monopoly meant that smaller nations were often forced to purchase outdated platforms or accept deals loaded with political strings. The JF-17 broke that cycle by offering a reliable, modern and affordable fighter that came without restrictions or the constant fear of sanctions. When Nigeria inducted the JF-17 into its fleet, it was more than just a sale. It was a demonstration that a country outside NATO could produce and export a credible, combat-ready fighter. Myanmar followed, and other countries began showing interest, not just because of the aircraft itself, but because of what it represented: freedom from dependency on Western approval. For these nations, the JF-17 is not merely a piece of military hardware. It is a tool of sovereignty, one that allows them to defend their skies without worrying about being pawns in global politics. Every successful export deal enhances Pakistan's reputation as a defense exporter, something that was unimaginable just a generation ago, and each new buyer adds another layer of credibility to the jet's reputation. For India, this trend is deeply unsettling because it undermines New Delhi's attempt to project itself as the only regional defense powerhouse. The more Pakistan sells the JF-17 abroad, the more it positions itself as an alternative supplier for countries that might otherwise have turned to India or its Western partners. This export success creates diplomatic ripples, strengthening Pakistan's ties with partner nations and giving it influence far beyond South Asia. What Western defense analysts see is not just a fighter jet competing with the F-16, but a shifting balance in the global defense market where Pakistan is emerging as a player in its own right. The JF-17's expanding footprint is therefore not only a technical triumph, but also a strategic one, reshaping perceptions of Pakistan's role in the world and giving the nation a platform from which to challenge long-standing hierarchies in global defense trade. Western defense circles have a complicated relationship with the JF-17 because on one hand they acknowledge its growing importance, and on the other hand they are uneasy about what it represents. The term F-16 replacement that many analysts use is not meant as flattery. It is a reflection of the reality that the JF-17 has emerged as the most logical successor for air forces that can no longer afford or access American fighters. For decades, the F-16 dominated the skies of developing nations, serving as a symbol of modernity and alliance with the West. But over time, the costs of purchasing and maintaining the aircraft soared, and the politics of acquiring it became even more complicated. Countries that once relied on Washington to supply them now face long waits, complex approval processes, and the constant risk of sanctions. Into this gap steps the JF-17, offering nearly the same capabilities with far fewer headaches. What makes Western analysts uncomfortable is the fact that this alternative is not being offered by NATO allies or traditional defense giants, but by Pakistan, a country long considered a client of Western suppliers rather than a competitor. Every time the JF-17 is discussed as an F-16 replacement, it is a recognition that Pakistan has, against the odds, developed a platform that threatens to eat into the West's market and influence. This is particularly significant because the JF-17 does not come attached with political conditions. It can be sold to nations that Washington or Brussels may avoid, giving those countries options they never had before. For Pakistan, this recognition is a badge of honor because it validates years of effort and sacrifice put into creating an indigenous solution. For the West, it is an uncomfortable reminder that defense innovation is no longer limited to the usual players. The unease is further compounded by the JF-17's steady evolution, proving that it is not just a one-time project, but a living program capable of advancing with each new block. In the eyes of Western defense strategists, this makes the JF-17 not just a competitor but a disruptor, a jet that challenges the established order of military aviation and forces even the most skeptical observers to take Pakistan's aerospace industry seriously. The recognition of the JF-17 in Western defense circles carries with it a sense of unease, because what Pakistan and China have created together is not just a fighter jet, but a symbol of how the balance of power in defense manufacturing is shifting. For decades, the global narrative was that advanced combat aircraft could only be designed, produced, and exported by established Western powers like the United States, France, or Britain, or by a select few like Russia. Pakistan was rarely, if ever, seen as capable of playing in that league. Yet the JF-17 has forced even the most skeptical analysts to acknowledge that the old assumptions no longer hold true. Western think tanks and defense journals increasingly describe the JF-17 as the F-16 replacement, not because they want to elevate it, but because they recognize it genuinely fills a gap left by aging F-16 fleets around the world. What troubles them is that this replacement is being offered by Pakistan, a nation they once viewed as dependent rather than independent in the defense sector. The unease comes from the fact that the JF-17 is not constrained by the political conditions that define Western arms sales. Washington can dictate who receives an F-16 and under what terms, but Pakistan can sell the JF-17 with far more flexibility, meaning countries sidelined by the West suddenly have a new option. This freedom changes the dynamics of global defense sales, and each successful export deal chips away at Western influence in regions where control was once taken for granted. At the same time, there is respect mixed with this discomfort. Western analysts cannot ignore that the JF-17 has steadily improved across its different blocks, that it has proven itself in actual combat, and that it continues to evolve technologically. This forces them to recognize Pakistan's aerospace industry as credible, resilient, and capable of competing on an international stage. The very fact that discussions in Western media compare it with the F-16 is itself proof of how seriously it is taken. Unease, therefore, is matched by reluctant respect, and together they signal the arrival of Pakistan as a defense player whose achievements can no longer be overlooked or dismissed. The story of the JF-17 is not just about speed, range, or radar. It is about independence, resilience, and the power of innovation in the face of doubt. It has broken monopolies, rattled India's confidence, unsettled Western strategists, and inspired nations looking for freedom from political strings. The JF-17 is no longer just a symbol of Pakistan's defense. It is a message to the world that true strength is not bought, it is built. And that is why, whether they like it or not, Western defense circles now call it the F-16 replacement India can't stop.